Good evening, hello, and welcome. My name is Travis with Oscar Mike Radio. I'm joined by my host, Danielle of Devoted to a Soldier, and together we are Devoted Mission. Yep, yep. Hang on, we're just going to turn that down. Fantastic. Sorry about that. So why are we here tonight? What's going on? We're here on this evening of Memorial Day weekend to share a story with you. And Danielle, I kind of want to know what you think about this. This story is about a U.S. Army Green Beret who was lost to us in Laos during the Vietnam War, and it took 21 years for a son, family, and community to get closure. And what we're going to show you is what happened, not only to Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz Sr., God rest his soul, but also how it affected his son Richard and his journey to find closure for his family. And Danielle, we're doing this tonight, and I'm kind of curious, you take care of and minister to mothers who've lost their children. As a mom coming into this, and your son served in the Marine Corps, what are your feelings about this before we get started?
Well, I don't know if I can put actual words on it because it's been very emotional as I've watched Richard just today setting up and I've talked to him a little bit. I don't know if there's any actual full closure that happens. I think it's a process, and watching the ripple effect, because I always talk about ripple effect in life, watching this ripple effect of how it's affected him, how it's affected the community, how it's affecting me. I've never seen the documentary, so I'm kind of on my seat of what's going to happen, how is this going to unfold, and what it's going to do to me personally.
So we want to get into this, and what's going to happen is there's a tribute. A lot of people came together to make this moment happen. We thank them. You're going to watch a tribute to not only the veterans who served during the Vietnam War, a tribute to Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz Sr. You're going to also see people thank Richard for having the courage to tell his story. And then we're going to go into the movie, 21 Years of Folded Flag. Afterwards, there's going to be a live Q&A period. Danielle's going to take questions from people on the chats, and you're going to get a chance to ask Richard and Rudy questions directly. Rudy Childs was the producer, and Richard Fitz, this is his story. And, you haven't seen the documentary, but it is really special that we're able to have this moment together, Danielle.
I'm very excited and very honored to be sitting here, not just with you, but with Richard and Rudy.
So we're going to ask you to, ask questions. We're going to ask you to check this out, but we're going to ask you to listen and understand what the story being told here. So without any further waiting, we would like to present 21 Years of Folded Flag.
Sr., my husband, and Richard's dad. We are blessed and honored for that privilege. Thank you.
God bless America.
In honor of Memorial Day and remembering all those who gave the ultimate sacrifice and served the country, in honor of Richard A. Fitz, Sr., Post 2, Abington, Massachusetts.
Hi, my name is Susan Austin. I grew up in Abington, Mass., where Richard Fitz was from. My mother and I both wore Richard Fitz bracelets and my POW MIA bracelets for many years. My mother was buried in '75 with hers on. Mine had broken, and the VA was kind enough to find me another one with Richard Fitz's name on it. And I went to Richard Fitz's wake, and I put them in the box, both of them, the broken one and the one I wore for so many years. But to us in Abington, he'll always be a town hero.
Ed McGee here, United States Marine Corps.
And I put them in the box, both of them, the broken one and
POW bracelets were first created in May of 1970 by a California student group called Voices in Vital America, VIVA, with the intention that American prisoners of war in Vietnam not be forgotten. The bracelets sold for $2.50 or $3 a piece. My name is Carol Williams, and I ordered this bracelet when I was just 10 years old. I have worn this POW bracelet with Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz' name for over 50 years, remembering he and all that gave the ultimate sacrifice this Memorial Day.
21 years ago, but today the family of Vietnam War Sergeant Richard Fitz gave him the funeral they've been waiting for. News Army reports Fitz was laid to rest 3 days after his remains were returned to the Bay State.
More than 5,000 people turned out in the small town that might have been a page lifted from a Norman Rockwell calendar. Richard Fitz's family, joined by his comrades in uniform, men with ideals that nurtured Fitz's desire to serve his country. Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz was shot down over Laos on November 30th, 1968, as his Special Forces unit returned from a classified mission. That began an agonizing 21-year effort as Fitz's family tried to confirm his fate and then find his body. Today, the healing began.
In February of 1968, Sergeant Richard Allen Fitz went to war. Today, 21 years and 11 months later, Dick Fitz returns. Welcome home, Richard.
Then the slow cadence march towards Mount Vernon Cemetery, their footsteps echoing the eulogy that remembered all the Richard Fitzes missing in action across the Vietnam years. On a lake not far from the cemetery where the burial service would be held, children played hockey in much the same manner that Richard Fitz and his friends played on many a winter's day some 30 years ago. The Green Berets led the procession to the cemetery, followed by Arthur and Rosella Fitz, who consoled each other as their son was about to be buried after the long wait. Bob! Runner! Bob! And a missing helicopter formation flew over the gravesite, giving their final salute. Richard Fitz was finally home. Gary Armstrong, News 7, Abington.
Our family is honored and humbled that the USV named their chapter after Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz Sr., my husband, and Richard's dad. We are blessed and honored for that privilege. Thank you.
God bless America.
In honor of Memorial Day and remembering all those who gave the ultimate sacrifice and served the country, in honor of Richard A. Fitz, Sr., Post 2, Abington, Massachusetts.
Hi, my name is Susan Austin. I grew up in Abington, Mass, where Richard Fitz was from. My mother and I both wore Richard Fitz bracelets and my POW MIA bracelets for many years. My mother was buried in 75 with hers on. Mine had broken, and the VA was kind enough to find me another one with Richard Fitz's name on it. And I went to Richard Fitz's wake, and I put them in the box, both of them, the broken one and the one I wore for so many years. But to us in Abington, he'll always be a town hero.
Ed McGee here, United States Marine Corps, saying happy Memorial Day to all the veterans out there, and especially to those that aren't with us anymore, my heroes, including Richard Fitz, a casualty of the Vietnam War, whose ashes were finally returned home to his family. I will think of you in my prayers. When I see a flag, I will always think of you. Those that didn't make it back are truly our heroes. Happy Memorial Day. Semper Fi.
Scott and Gail here. Staff Sergeant Fitz, listen, thank you for your service. Thinking of you and your family and your friends. And God bless.
On this Memorial Day, thinking of all the people that gave the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Susan Crosby, and I have a story that's one of those it's a small world type of experiences. It began in early 2019 when I was attending a Vietnam Veterans of America monthly meeting in Asheville, North Carolina. And I was discussing with the group my plans for an upcoming trip to Laos. I asked the guys if there was anyone they would like me to remember while I was in Southeast Asia. And one of the members, named Ted, said that he used to have a POW MIA bracelet with the name Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz on it. When he said that, that name sounded familiar to me, but I could not place it. So I prepared for my trip to Laos, which was for the purpose of honoring Colonel Carter Luna, who is named on the POW MIA bracelet that I've had for over 45 years. Prior to my trip, I was able to locate Richard Fitz Jr., and I discussed my trip with him. While I was in Southeast Asia, I posted pictures and information on my Facebook page. A neighbor and friend of mine named Dave, who was a Marine, replied to my post and said, "I have a bracelet with the name Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz on it." Now I could remember why the name seemed familiar to me, because Dave and I had discussed our bracelets before. When I returned from my trip, I connected with Richard Fitz Jr. again, and I offered to host a showing of his film, 21 Years of Folded Flag, in the remote mountain community where I lived in North Carolina. In June of 2019, we did a showing of the film, and Richard Fitz Jr. was there, and he was united with Ted and Dave, who shared the common bracelet bearing his father's name. It really was a small world. And we can never forget those that are still unaccounted for. They need to all come home.
This is Spirit Medium Tiffany Rice, and I want to take a moment to remember Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz and all of those who had given the ultimate sacrifice this Memorial Day weekend.
Hi, I'm Tanya Venom. And I'm Tia Mayhem of the hard rock power trio Stormstress. It's because of the immeasurable sacrifices made by brave warriors like Sergeant Fitz that we get to celebrate the beautiful freedoms we enjoy today. On this Memorial Day, we're sending our love and thoughts to the Fitz family in hopes that you may finally find peace after all this time. And we're also offering our gratitude to all our fallen heroes. At this time of year, we are always reminded of our fearless veteran grandfather, Homer Lafian, who was a sergeant of the 82nd Airborne Special Forces in World War II. We love you, Grandpa, and we miss you. Happy Memorial Day.
Liz Borden here, musician, jack of all trades, love the Fitz family, and so happy to give this shout out. I am wearing a bracelet. I've had this on since 1970 when I was a child, and asked my mother if I could have one of the POW and MIA bracelets that were being given out, and I believe they sold them for a small amount which went to a cause. But my mother took me, we were in New York, and she got me one. And I've worn it ever since. You can see it's very, very worn out. And I have Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz Sr. on mine. Well, through twists and turns and different things in life, his son, Rich Jr., is now my brother. His family is my family. The sacrifice that Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz Sr. gave his life for me, for our country. I think the documentary that Rich Jr. did is brilliant. It's moving. And I would just like to say thank you, to Senior and his whole family. And he gave his life for us, for me, for this country. I will always have this on. Rich and I decided that I'd keep wearing it to keep the conversation going, to keep it fresh, to have people talk about it. And all I can say is thank you.
Hi, Rich. Jim, Bob, and Paul Doolittle from Crossroads Music. We are remembering our family's service this Memorial Day. Our grandfather was in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. Our father was in World War II and the Korean War. And we have some pictures here of them in uniform together. Thank you, Rich.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Rich Fitz for letting me, Tom Tolman, play on the soundtrack in honor of his dad, Rich Fitz Sr., who was a Green Beret and served in Vietnam, and also in honor of all the other veterans out there who served in protecting our country over the years. Thanks, Rich.
Hello, Richard. I'm Ken Bowring, and I served as a 1-0 for RT Idaho and RT Sidewinder in S.O.G. While I did not know or have the honor to serve with your father, he is forever remembered at the United States Army Special Operations Command's Memorial Wall at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I've seen his name many times throughout my service. He and 796 of our Special Forces brothers from Vietnam are remembered on that wall, along with 1,241 of our Army Special Operations soldiers who paid the ultimate sacrifice in all of our other conflicts. Your father's legacy and those he served with lives on. And I'd like to give a quote here that I like from the commander of our Army Expeditionary Force in the First World War, General of the Army, John J. Pershing. He said, "Time will not dim the glory of their deeds." And that is so true with our memorial wall. So I thank you for what you're doing to preserve the legacy of your father and those who served with him.
Hello everyone, my name is Hirsch Gardner from the band New England. Don't ever wanna lose ya. Don't ever wanna lose ya. Don't ever wanna lose ya. On this day, we are paying tribute to Sergeant Richard A. Fitz and all of those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you for your service on this Memorial Day.
Hi, Richard. I'm Dick Thompson. I was at Fubai when your father was killed. And as I mentioned to you when we talked on the phone about 18 months ago, I had the task of inventorying your father's personal effects. And that's when I saw the picture of the little 2-year-old boy that I never forgot. I appreciate you honoring your father with this film, and I hope to see you at SOAR this year. Take care and stay safe.
Hi everyone, it's Gary Hoey here, guitar player, recording artist,
husband and father of 2, and a family of military veterans and police officers. I could not be more honored to be here today remembering Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz and all who gave the ultimate sacrifice. And to all the families, we say thank you and God bless you on this Memorial Day.
Hello, I'm Letty Clark, and although I'm not a veteran, I have the utmost respect and great love for the veterans that have served our country, and especially the ones who gave their lives. One particular veteran is Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz from Abington, Massachusetts. And in 1989 or 90, it was the largest funeral ever held for someone who was in the service. This man left a young boy who didn't know how his father passed away. See, his dad wasn't drafted. His dad volunteered. And he also volunteered to become a Green Beret. And then he volunteered to become a guy in secret missions in the Green Beret. And his son has made a movie, 21 Years, A Folded Flag, that I hope everyone gets a chance to see. And it's just a snippet into the lives of these people that gave theirs for us. He was on secret missions, black ops, whatever you want to call it, but he ended up giving the supreme sacrifice, his life. And it wasn't until 21 years later that his family got his remains back. And his son took it as a project of love to make this film. And it's an amazing film. You should all check it out. There were over 50,000 men and women who died in Vietnam. Undoubtedly the most unpopular war we've ever had in this country. And this Memorial Day, I'd like you to think about it, because Memorial Day is, yay, party time. No, this Memorial Day is not about that. Memorial Day is about remembering men and women who gave their lives. And, you know, I'm a comedian, and I'm usually making jokes about stuff, but not this. We have over 50 people, Green Berets and others, that are still missing. And think of those families. These people gave the supreme sacrifice. And I think this Memorial Day, we should give them the respect and love they so much deserve. So, thank you.
Yeah, my name is James Henry Jones, and I was adopted in the name of Jones. And when I got out of the military, I changed it back to Shorten. That's why if you look at my name in a lot of areas, it says James Shorten Jones. It's tough, you know. We had 135% casualties in S.O.G. Wounded more than once. I was wounded 5 times. Well, I was wounded once on an A-team too, so. Yeah, it's just, it just means a lot to try and get closure for the family, and they're your brothers, you know. We lost like 5 guys a week, you know, wounded, killed, or captured. Not only to remember Richard Fitz and also Eldon Bardwell, I mean, and all the other men that we lost over there, and those who have succumbed to diseases and stuff over here after the war. You know, they're beautiful people. This country needs to remember them. They need to realize that these guys are heroes, and these are the people that kept our country going.
Hi, Richard. This is Rob Graham over in England. I'm sending you this message today to remember your father, Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz, who was tragically killed in action November 30th, 1968, in Laos, running an eldest son operation for MAC-VSOG. As you know, We've been working with some of your dad's mates to memorialise the men of Mac v S.O.G in our video game, and Tiltmeyer particularly remembers your dad as being a formidable poker player. The work you're doing to honour your father's memory is really first rate, and we'd really like to help. I spoke with General Bore and some of our team this morning, and we'd like to honour your father's memory by adding in a plaque to our video game in memory of your dad at the end of the Eldest Son mission. This plaque will be seen by millions of players. I know the men of S.O.G are really looking out for you and have been for some time, and your dad looking down, he'd be so proud of the man you've become. Let's keep this fire burning together.
Hi, I'm Mistress Carrie, and I am honored to have been asked to be part of this video presentation. Memorial Day is a very somber occasion for many people that have affiliations with the military. Not only those that mourn their brothers and sisters in arms, but the families that mourn the loss of their loved ones. Richard Fitz Jr. never got to know his dad. His dad died a hero, but in secret. And the journey that Richard Fitz Jr. took to get to know his dad and to learn the secrets of his father's service are this amazing tribute of the love of a son and a father. I was honored to meet Junior a few years ago when he started making the film, and I just think that it's such a powerful piece of filmmaking that only a son could make. And I think screening it over Memorial Day weekend is a really powerful way to remind everyone why it is that we commemorate this holiday. Richard is a loving son whose family has sacrificed more than most for the country that we live in. As the wife of an active duty Marine now myself, I have a better understanding about what military families go through. And this unimaginable loss that the Fitz family has suffered is something that the rest of us should remember and be grateful for. I know you're going to love the film as much as I do. I'm honored to call Richard a friend. And obviously from everyone in my family, we say thank you for the sacrifice that your family has made for this country. And we'll be remembering your dad this weekend and every day, because he is now a part of my war room too.
Hello, my name is John Stryker Meyer, aka Tilt. During the Vietnam War, I served in the Secret War with Green Berets that ran missions across the fence, top secret missions. Amongst the many men, the Green Berets that I served with was Richard Fitz. On November 30th, he was one of 7 Green Berets that were in a helicopter on a top secret mission flying into Laos when their helicopter was tragically shot down. All on board died. He was killed in action. And that date, I'll never forget. I remember Richard as a fearless Green Beret, an outstanding soldier, and on a very personal level, he had a bad habit of taking my money in poker games. He was one hell of a poker player. More importantly, he served his country with valor and high honors. And today, I salute Richard Fitz, and I thank his son, Richard Fitz, for following his dad's footsteps and getting his story out to America. Airborne.
Unsung, the noblest of deeds will die. Welcome to small town America. Abington, a tiny little town in Massachusetts, just south of Boston. And in this town, they have built a wall to remember and honor their fallen heroes, and a reminder of who and what they left behind.
The names on the wall are important, but for every name on the wall, there is a story. There's a story of joy and love, and a story of grief and heartache. And I think that the people in this town, people everywhere, but I'm partial to Abington, people in this town need to hear those stories. They need to see faces. They need to hear what these people were like and how they lived their lives and what they left behind.
I'm the mother of Staff Sergeant Bill Callahan, United States Marines, EOD. He was killed April 27th, 2007 in Ramadi, Iraq.
My son, Sergeant Daniel Vasilian, was killed in Afghanistan 2 days before Christmas, December 23rd, 2013.
My father, Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz, was a Green Beret who was killed in Laos on November 30th, 1968 on a classified mission. There are possibly millions of like stories. So many families have sacrificed. Mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters. All of our stories have a reality that is darker than footage, deeper than history. It's history with a broken heart. Memories full of empty fragments and missing pieces, desperate to find wholeness and resolve. There is no footage or reenactments that will fulfill that void. If you are a son or a daughter that has been struck with the tragedy of your parent being killed, no matter how old you are, your most poignant question is, how did this happen? And your answer is your God-given right to know. In my case, it was much different.
There are no American combat forces in Laos. We have been providing logistical support and some training for the neutralist government in order to avoid Laos falling under communist domination. As far as American manpower in Laos is concerned, there are none there at the present time on a combat basis. We do have aerial reconnaissance. We do have perhaps some other activities. I won't discuss those other activities at this time.
Current day Laos. Beautiful, addicting in its tranquility, and majestic in its grace. One could get lost in dreams of a peaceful life just by seeing it in pictures. But today is a radical contrast of what Laos was 5 decades ago. The events that took place then in a top-secret war would completely alter my life forever. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Richard A. Fitz, Jr., and I'd like to share with you my story. A story of searching for something and someone I never knew. My father, Staff Sergeant Richard A. Fitz, a Green Beret who was killed in 1968 in the Vietnam War when I was only 2 years old. A story that took 21 years and 41 days until his remains were returned, and only then allowed me just a glimpse into a mysterious world, and in turn led me on a journey that wove through a myriad of unanswered questions, and the realization that in some ways I may have been searching for myself. Sometimes in life we stumble across a treasure, and I was to discover exactly that in a letter home from my father written November of 1968 that told of a mission. That letter would shine a beacon of light pointing to the Black Hills of South Dakota and led me to a close friend and teammate of my father's, Brian Krause, who recalled that very mission.
One of the most memorable one was we were assigned to the demilitarized zone. The first thing we do is you leave the insertion site and you just get lost. You just go up and down the hills and get away from your insertion site. You try not to make it predictable where you're going or what you're trying to do. You just get lost. And the hills in the demilitarized zone were pretty much straight up and straight down. So we go up one hill, go halfway down the other side, walk along the side, and go back over and try to just lose any trackers. And then we spent the night on the side of a hill, sleeping in a 45-degree slope and trying to brace your feet up against some trees. You never take your equipment off. And the next day, we're early in the morning, we continued up top of one of these mountains, and we found a whole bunker complex. We found some wire first, blue communications wire. We walked up the hill following the wire, and we found a bunker complex. All the bunkers were empty, nothing left behind. So, okay, we'll look it over, took pictures. We heard firing down below at the bottom of the hill. Sounded like they were doing range firing. So I said, well, let's break up their day. We said, well, we're going to set up an ambush. There was a trail. We didn't know if it was going to be anything would happen or not. So we set up an ambush. We set up some claymore mines, and we waited for about a half an hour or so, and then we heard people coming up the trail.
We had 4 VC coming up the trail, and we ambushed them. But we stepped on our dicks because they were walking point for a company.
They came up charging. Well, thank goodness they had set up the claymore mines with white phosphorus in front of the claymore mines. They blew these white phosphorus off, and of course it stopped the initial attack, but they were quickly, the NVA were very good about addressing. They used whistles. They used blowing these whistles and whistle signals for deployment around us, and they were starting to surround us, and it didn't take long.
Needless to say, the company drove us up to the top of the mountain. Our shit was weak. He completely encircled us within 20 minutes.
But when the helicopters finally came, the gunships came first, and that was, what a beautiful sight those Cobra gunships were. They're narrow bodies, and they just circled us and were surrounded. They said we got the word that there were maybe 300 surrounding us, 300 people, and they just started shooting anybody around us. And they kept on shooting all day long.
This is no lie. The gunships got there just in the nick of time.
We were shouting at each other. That's how close we were. They were hollering us, and we were hollering at them. And then we called in airstrikes, and they heard them get burnt by the white phosphorus. And I heard them screaming. And take that, you son of bitches. And we were starting to run out of ammunition. I carried a pretty heavy load, but we were getting low on ammunition, and we started getting more selective of where we're shooting.
Right now, you're probably wondering, did anyone get hurt? No one got killed. We had 3 Brew and 1 American hurt. Guess who the American was? You're right, me. The VC was so close, they were throwing concussion grenades in our perimeter. 1 Brew got fragments in the stomach and leg. Grenade! We both saw the grenade come in and bounce 4 feet in front of us. And he jumped up and stood in front of me. When it blew up, the concussion sent us both about 10 to 12 feet in the air. Don't worry, I'm all right. I've got a punctured eardrum and a minor concussion.
Time for an extraction. Since we were on top of their bunkers, we found one of the bunkers that was a good extraction site, had a clearing overhead. Helicopters were able to come in close. Spider, I think, was one of our chopper pilots, and he came in and he was hitting the treetops, chopping down little small branches, and they threw down ropes out of the helicopter, and we grabbed onto the ropes. And first we loaded up our mountain yards, got them extracted. Then we started getting in extracted, and before we could get extracted, there was somebody coming up the trail for us. You can see this NVA soldier coming up, not the trail, but coming up behind us, behind the bunker, and it says Bader or Fitz saw him first, and Bader and Fitz were having a little argument on who's going to shoot this guy. I'm the team commander, but I saw him first. My chance to shoot him. do funny things in there, and so I had to tell the chopper pilot, hold off a minute. We're having a little argument. Who's going to shoot this guy?
All the members of my team have been put in for Bronze Stars. I don't know whether we'll get it or not, but we've been put in for it. It's for the last mission we pulled. When we came out, General Stilwell was waiting to congratulate us personally. He had been listening to the whole thing over the radio while Krauss was calling back for airstrikes. He made the remark that it sounded like World War broke loose on that goddamn hill. He said the only thing he wanted to ask us is where we got the balls to ambush such a large force with only 12 men.
Takes a lot of courage to do what that boy was doing, whatever it was.
However foggy and vague early '68 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina would be for this 2-year-old boy, a little guidance from my mother would help me grasp the one and only memory I had of my father. That was of him taking me up to the kiddie jump tower and sending me off down the zip line. Priceless to me now. From time to time, Mom would fill me in on the vast array of interests my father indulged in. Archery, scuba diving, motorcycles, horseback riding, auto mechanics, shooting, playing drums and guitar, singing, dancing. He was even a 3rd-degree brown belt in karate and would show off by breaking boards with his fists. It truly seemed endless.
I remember him as a very driven person. What he wanted to do, he found a way to do it. He was always joking, laughing, taking risks and chances in his life.
At the young age of 17, my father had already set quite a lofty goal for himself. That goal was inspired by traditional American values and the loss of a great man who had come to be known as the godfather of Special Forces and the Green Berets.
The first time the family became aware of the Green Berets was while they watched an ironically similar event on TV after President Kennedy was assassinated.
There was 2 gentlemen in the rotunda in the honor guard that had some Green Berets on, and it was explained that they were a special outfit being trained at Fort Bragg, and President Kennedy had allowed them to wear the Green Beret. And that's how it started. He said to his mother and me, I'm going to wear that someday. As a kid, you laugh, okay, you're going to wear it. Little did I know.
His father was a member of the VFW, and I was a member of the VFW. And we were down there one night, and Walter, who was his father, came over and asked me if I'd be willing to talk to his son about Vietnam. He was in the Special Forces, the Green Beret, and he was going to be going over there, and he was going to be going into the Central Highlands, where I was. So I said, sure, I will. So after that, we sat down on the table and talked about Vietnam. I guess my father was good at things to make him good in the military. Again, it was easy for him to adapt to things. Very quick learner, very outgoing. So when you train in the military, especially become a Green Beret, those are qualities you have to have and more. And I guess he took to the training very quickly, very easily. I won't say easily, but it was a smoother transition than most for him. And so he was able to complete the training fairly quickly because of those type of things that, just the type of person he was. When he knew something, he went for it. When he liked something, he wanted something, he went for it. And there was no, half-assed.
The training that they went through, they were an elite team, and they'd go places that other servicemen didn't go. And their jobs were really dangerous.
I never put too much thought into what my father did for work. So focusing on what it really meant to be or earn the Green Beret hadn't quite registered with me. But as I grew older, intrigue started to win me over. So I revisited what physical evidence we still had. The amount of education and training, to me, was mind-boggling. I was also to get a small glimpse into my father's everyday life from a tiny journal. But yet again, it was vague and left me with more questions. One thing I did understand, if your training is classified, then my father's job certainly was not ordinary. As I would slowly learn about who and what my father was, and his time serving in Special Forces, there was one thing for damn sure. He and all of these Green Berets evidently had some huge effing cojones. But still, I would never get the chance to hear these stories spoken to me in his own words, or truly know him as most sons would come to know their own fathers. As it turned out, not only was my father a Green Beret, but had also volunteered for a top-secret unit, Mark V. S.O.G, the Military Assistance and Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. Bit of a misleading title, considering what they were really doing. Conducting long-range reconnaissance, operating in the enemy's own backyard, wiretapping, sabotage, prisoner snatches, and psychological warfare, being directed from the highest levels of the Pentagon and the White House, all whilst under a veil of secrecy. Some real CIA, James Bond type shit.
3.2 million Americans served in Vietnam. Of that, 20,000 were Green Berets. Of that, 2,000 served in S.O.G. Of that, 400 to 600 ran recon, of which your dad was one. And so those numbers tell you how elite the unit was and what your dad was a part of.
As I grew up, to me, my father was older stories, secondhand information, handed down faded memories, never something tangible and real. It all seemed like a character in a book, a fictional hero. You can't reach into a book or a story to touch them or talk with them. No holidays spent, no birthdays celebrated. And like any son would want, the opportunity to hand their father a gift, as my father did for his father on a very special Father's Day. He would send home a letter and a recording of his actual voice, the only piece of him we would have left. And with this gift came much more. My father's hard-forged rite of passage to manhood and a nation's symbol of excellence, his Green Beret.
Dear Dad, approximately 19 months ago, a young boy left home to join the army. About 8 months later, this young person, only now a young man, came home and gave you what you always wanted, a pair of silver wings. Do you remember? He pinned them on your chest. I'll never forget that night, Dad. I felt closer to you than ever before in my whole life. Do you remember what you said that night? You told the people that you wished that I would award you with my Green Beret. And I said you would have to earn it yourself. Well, I tried to find something you would like for Father's Day. And I figured that my Green Beret would be the best, so here it is. Please take care of it, Dad. It has gone through hell with me and is all worn out. Take it in your hands and squeeze it, Dad. Maybe if you close your eyes, you can see what we've went through or where we've been. I don't know if you can or not. I don't know if I make the beret or the beret makes me. But let me tell you, whoever that beret is, you can see and feel me. When you hold that beret in your hands, you hold me. Because we have been through so much together that we are part of each other. I wish that I could tell you the places we've been, or the things that we've done, but I can't. The best I can do is send you the beret that has been with me all the way. Maybe you can close your eyes and squeeze it and see it all. I don't know. I know if I ever wanted to remember, all I would have to do is close my eyes and squeeze it, and I would be able to see it all again. I'm just sorry that I couldn't be there to give it to you in person. I think it'll be a hell of a lot easier than this way. Please take care of it, Dad. It's been through more than enough. And don't want to go through any more. Treat it like your own son, Dad. Because believe it or not, the gray you hold in front of you is your own son. Happy Father's Day.
Less than 6 months after my father had sent that letter, the fateful mission my father was killed on would occur. The government, however, would not admit any knowledge of his death and would keep his status as MIA, or missing in action. I remember my grandfather, Alden Smith, from my mother's side of the family, a no-nonsense, hardened World War II Navy veteran. He told me he was holding me in his arms the day the casualty officers came to his door looking for my mother. They told him of my father's MIA status. Years later, he would admit that deep down, he knew what they meant, and it wasn't missing in action.
Yeah, I was at my in-laws' house at the time that they came to the door. And I said to the guy, no, I don't think so. He was wounded because he had written me a letter home saying that he was wounded, but he was fine, you know. So I assumed that, you know, they knew that he was wounded, you know, and they were getting that confused. So I kind of like didn't really believe what they were telling me. They came to tell me he was missing in action. So I said, no, he's not missing, he's fine. I had the feeling that he wasn't really lost, because he was so good at, you know, like finding ways to get out of things and, you know, taking care of himself. I figured that he probably found a way to get away, or that he was captured, or that he found some nice little Asian girl and took off with her.
Yet another patriot protecting our freedoms and democracy, fighting to liberate the oppressed, thousands of miles away from home and his family. Then suddenly that family sits and waits with no answers, just wondering. Alongside so many others in the same situation, asking the same questions of fate and what ifs. Those questions would slowly awaken a sleeping giant, determined to seek out answers, a movement for the truth. POWMIA, prisoner of war, missing in action. My grandparents, Walter and Rosella, were first and foremost really spearheading a lot of this work. Their constant efforts to try to keep it remembered, keep their names in the spotlight, because it's a natural tendency for people to forget. And if you tend to forget, you don't keep that stuff alive, then it tends to, it's a domino effect. It tends to, all those dominoes tend to fall down and nobody gets remembered. You know, I do believe this whole story with my father and Walter and Rosella doing their part,
Oh, they lied to us.
it laid a good foundation for this, at least the local area, if not even bigger. To this day, I still get bracelets worldwide returned to me or get reached out. So if it wasn't for efforts from them, there's no way that could happen.
The Fitz family, this situation was all consuming. It took over their whole lives. It made them so concentrated on that, they couldn't see anything else. And for a young child to have to go through that all the time, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
And another good, strong presence in all this story, Becky Coit, an undying supporter, and many people can remember the van Becky's van, who would drive around here for years, and she had that black van completely decked out with Vietnam bumper stickers. You couldn't even see the paint anymore on this thing. And I'm pretty sure it's common knowledge that those bumper stickers were holding that van together. But point was, metaphorically, it was holding a lot more than just her van together. Those stickers were holding together her reason for her undying support.
It started back, actually. It's something that left a mark on me from my childhood when I was visiting at my girlfriend's house. And back in the days of Korea, they did not send the casualty officer first to the house. It was broadcasted on the radio. And Mrs. Ferguson, we were listening to the radio. I happened to be staying overnight. And her son's name came on the radio, and she died of a heart attack that night. And that left a mark on me. I didn't know then that I'd be doing what I am now. But it's something that always stayed like in the back of my mind, that I had to do something. And I guess the second project, meaning that is, I'm a mother, and this could have been one of my kids. And I feel very strongly that if you've been granted the right to live in this country, throughout your life you should do something to try to give back into your country what you've given. I learned that from John Kennedy.
And those same marks that were left on Becky would become permanent scars on all of us as well. Picture your own son, daughter, or husband missing in action for years and not having any answers. That can take a serious emotional toll on anyone. You reach out for the smallest details or hold on to whatever there is around you to keep your loved one close.
No thanks to the government.
And here is Junior, the only son of my father, the direct descendant. Not only did I look like him, but as well carried his name. It was only natural that the bloodline continued to bear the crown. And so it was handed down. Again, as I was, very little, I was prepped into a certain look in a certain way, custom little made green uniforms, little green berets and all this. In 1975, my mother had asked the government officials to reopen my father's case and review all the findings to see if there may be more answers. It was decided that my father was assumed dead, a presumption of his death, if you will. But still, no body, no proof, and any forthcoming of information was a long shot at best. For my mother and I, it had been 7 years of wondering, waiting, meeting others still waiting for missing loved ones for many more years than we have. And still, we had no definite answers. Mom's best direction was to try to move on. From that point, that's exactly what we did. Tried to move on. I still remember watching TV when more of the POWs were released and coming home off the planes. Clinging to the TV, listening for his name, watching the scroll of names across the screen, just waiting. But it never came. And so, life goes on. The 75 funeral, I guess it could be a bit of closure. It was a point, a pivotal point, especially for my mother, where she had been back and forth, and along with the Fitzes, Walter and Rosella, trying to find out answers. And Raw was either stonewalled or kind of shunned, or people would just clam up. And at this point, when my mother had met a lady, I believe this lady had a husband that was missing from Korea, I believe it was. And this lady was going on 15 years not knowing. And just her life was consumed with trying to find answers, looking for her husband.
And I just couldn't see her living in that doubt for that long. And having her kids be in that situation. So that's why I asked to have the case reviewed. I didn't ask them to put a presumption of death on your dad. I asked them to open it up. It was their decision on what to do.
So in 75, the funeral was laid to rest, as you would say. and we would move on. And that's what we did. Try to not think of all that sadness and everyday wonder. And that's fine, you know. Probably the best move you could make, or the best decision at the time that you know how to work with, you know. And so we did that.
My life did go on. Who my father was and some of what he did was always known to me. I had a few pictures, some of his medals, a few personal belongings sent home from the Army. Any questions I had were always answered by my mother the best she could. But the reality is, I never kept the subject of it all in the forefront of my everyday life. Why keep asking or wondering if there are no answers? It can easily turn into a constant letdown. So you occupy yourself in other ways. Little did I know that during all these years, the U.S. had been working in conjunction with the Laotian government, alongside actual soldiers as eyewitnesses, to help locate, excavate, and ID remains in an effort to bring a full accounting of our missing in action. And for me, 2 decades later, it would all come around again.
I was at work in the back room. I was actually a boss of a couple people in the receiving department, and got a phone call. And there it was Walter Fitz, my grandfather. And all I hear on the phone is that typical Local 4 South Boston accent. "We found your father." And I kind of went numb. I didn't know what to think about that. And that's how this all started to play out, with a phone call. And I really wasn't up to date or privy to what was going on or why they found him or his remains. But I had put it all behind me. And here I am, a rock and roll guy living my life, young guy, and just having a ball, enjoying life. And this hit me. And I didn't know how to feel or react. I kind of went numb again. And that's when it all started.
I just remember uttering the words, and it came to me right at the time. I said, "You were given a new life. These guys are going to put together the pieces of the puzzle. You're going to actually be able to see what this person was as well as you can, just by people that know. It's going to come together slowly. It is going to give you a whole new outlet. You can have new people to talk to. You can have a support system. These people care. A lot of people may have not known you existed until this happened. And the amount of outpouring of support and what would eventually be love from some of these guys, it was real. Some of them, they traveled. They traveled to come to this wake.
And it's exactly what happened. And it was a life that I'm not going to say I didn't know anything about, but I just was so far removed. It was such a contrast to what I was doing.
My life suddenly went from this an 80s rocker thrust into this elite military world.
It really is like if you're in a sea of water and you drop a little spot of oil in there, you know, it just doesn't mix. I was completely out of my element. I didn't know anything about what anybody was talking about. Terms, acronyms, you know. Some people would come up to me and shake my hand as if I knew all about this and I was dealing with it all my life, which was not the case. So you tend to feel a little awkward and out of place. And this new life was something that from this point on, I had to learn all over again. And I mean, you know what? I didn't have to. I didn't have to learn it, but I should have. And it took me metaphorical lifetime to get to this point and figure out a lot about what I was being introduced to. I remember countless TV interviews and newspapers, and I must have met thousands of people I had never seen so much military and police and fire presence in my life at once. It was enormous. And you're going by, you're shaking hands, and you're numb, your head's spinning, and you're constantly trying to think of how am I going to thank all these people, and how do I react? And I don't know anything about what anybody's talking about. And most of the time, for some reason, I was not involved in a lot of the newscasts, a lot of the interviews, and I still don't understand why. Nobody does. As a matter of fact, a lot of people didn't even know my father had a son. As life goes on, we get back into it. It's when I get the call. I'm already this long-haired rock and roll, local little guitar wannabe hero, and pretty boy. You know, I look like the poster child for most 80s rock and roll bands back then. Spandex, I didn't care. I didn't care what I looked like. And a little chip on my shoulder. But when you're put into this this new world, this completely contrast world, the oil to water, so to speak. Here's a persona that I used to, as a child, I used to be this little miniature Green Beret who would carry on his father's name or his likeness, or be that guy. And then now I'm coming back and everybody's watching me get handed a flag at my father's funeral with the long hair and the typical rock and roll attitude and mentality.
Richard Fitz left behind a wife and infant son when he went to Vietnam. Now 23, the son was presented with the flag that covered his father's casket.
You're older right now than your dad was when he went overseas.
Yeah.
Have you given that any thought at all?
Yeah, it's very different. I just, like I said before, I just wish I could have known him. That's about it. So it was quite a contrast. And that, in a way, that was a poster and a picture of the contrast of what I was dealing with. Because that the way I looked in my lifestyle was completely foreign to what I was sitting in the middle of. Emotionally, physically, yes, but especially emotionally. Inside, a lot of people were geared to think that, well, I didn't know he had a son, or maybe that's why they didn't know he had a son. Maybe they didn't want to tell everybody he was a long-haired rock and roller or whatever, Who knows? The poster child thing is absolutely right. I was, again, the contrast.
Hundreds of people gathered in
All the newscasts, interviews, reporters, camera crews, the abundant media attention, but I still felt somewhat of an outsider, not really included. Yes, there were some that reached out, but it was obvious that most looking in did not understand my situation. But one keen-sensed Marine veteran would step in as mentor and help guide me through. And soon after, he too would realize something about himself.
Why I made it back was to help you. And anybody else that, we'd met a lot of other, both me and you, had met other kids down at the wall whose fathers' names are on the wall. My wife always kids me that if I disappeared, all she had to do was call the Capitol Police and she'd find me sitting on top of the hill beside the wall. It helped me survive. Being with you helped me survive. It gave me a reason to keep on living. When I looked at it, Rich, it seemed like everybody else was the celebrity. And they were paying, all attention to the Rosella and Walter, not even your mother so much. She wasn't that involved in it for many years, when I was alive. But Becky Coit and everything else, and the quote, these are the people. And I kept seeing you and you kept seeing me, and I'm saying, why ain't somebody talking to this kid? It's his father. And it didn't seem like nobody was talking to you. You know, so I wanted to support you for that reason. I used to go bring my kids up and listen to you practice heavy metal music. I think if I helped you any, was to realize that your father in the military was an honorable thing.
When they brought your father home, when I came back from Vietnam, I took my medals and everything and put them in my bureau, never to be seen again, because they were spitting at us and doing all that. So when they brought your father home, I had a meeting with the MDC police because they were coming out, and the sergeant in charge said to me, tell all your guys you're authorized to wear your ribbons. That's the first time I wore my ribbons since I came back, was in honor of your father.
And this whole trip has taken me metaphorically. It's my journey, and it's my way of meeting my father. That metaphorical meeting came with a sudden realization of just how much the father I never knew symbolized hope and honor for so many.
When Sergeant Fitt's body arrived in Massachusetts, he became the state's first Vietnam MIA enlisted man to return home. At the time, his father said he felt like someone had stuck a knife in his heart.
That hope and promise was evident throughout our nation and even across the globe. From our local everyday Joes all the way up to the Massachusetts State House.
There's nothing tougher than meeting with a family, and of course it's not the only circumstances under which you're expressing sympathy, needless to say. I had a great time as governor. I loved the job, but tragedy's part of it. And in many ways, you've got to represent the conscience of the community. I think it was important that all of us, from the governor on down, be reminded of what people like your dad did and tried to do. And at a minimum, it seems to me, you ought to express some real gratitude to them and to their sacrifice. So I can't think of anything that affects a family that has a greater impact than this. And I think the frustration at asking questions, wondering, pushing hard to get the right people to pursue this, and this was over 20 years, was something that you just had to respond to. I remember just having a sense of not only their love and affection for their family member, but the frustration of going up against bureaucracy and trying to get people to take it seriously. And just, you know, if you're a human being and you've got any kind of feeling, especially you spend time in the military, I mean, this is something that you have to respond to.
The outpour of support and sympathies came from so many. Dignitaries, congressmen, first responders, and veterans alike. Thousands from all walks of life brought together to honor and remember my father's sacrifice, as well as our families. Powerful stuff. Impossible to process it all so quickly. As I would walk through the entire week's events, I realized that this support made all the difference, and it would help all of us get through a bit easier. It all symbolized a victory of sorts. But within that victory, there would remain a thorn, a feeling of guilt. I came to realize this when a local Gold Star mother had told me her story of her son, who was inspired by my father's story.
We were watching the news one evening, and we saw a clip about your dad, Richard Fitz, coming home. It showed your grandmother sitting in Abington outside at a service, and Bill could not understand why someone was coming home now. He then went on to really look into Vietnam, the history behind it. He looked up all of the missing in action from Massachusetts at one point. Once he got into high school, he decided he wanted to become a reservist. The day 9/11 hit, Bill was activated full-time. He had gone out as a favor to another Marine to clear some bombs that evening. And as he went out, when he went out, another was detonated right underneath him.
And there I was, with this figurative blood on my hands. So many mixed emotions to process. How could I not feel somewhat guilty? Take the tragic events of 9/11, for example. Of course I felt angry and mourned for all the victims and families, but I realized a different side of sadness. I knew, firsthand, we were about to create more stories just like mine. The first responders that went overseas were cut from the same cloth as my father. I knew what was coming. Then I was introduced to another local Abington hero that would help me understand that I was not alone, feeling mixed emotions of sadness and pride, but carrying guilt as well. Only this hero was not etched from battle. This hero was carved from personal loss, as were so many others on that fateful day of September 2001.
I lost my husband on 9/11. Jeff was merely going to work that day. He was flying out to a conference. He worked for Compaq at the time. He was flying out to a conference in LA, and he was a passenger on Flight 11, which was the first plane to crash into the towers. His plane crashed into the North Tower, and you know, along with 80-something other individuals that day who were doing their normal thing, he didn't come home. Terrorists had a different plan for him. Every time I would hear of a new death, a new service member killed in action, it would really tug at my heartstrings, and I felt in an odd way a little bit responsible, because so many men and women signed on, and I've had parents tell me this. Their sons or daughters or husbands, wives, whomever, signed on to the service because of 9/11.
Moving through this journey, eventually a feeling of acceptance would slowly fill the gaps in between the labyrinth of secrets I was navigating. It was all about national security. The details of my father's death had been kept from our family for almost 30 years, and still classified when he was buried. Why am I not angry? Acceptance and pride. Knowing he volunteered for it all. He understood and believed in what he was doing. He knew sterile missions meant no dog tags or anything identifying him as American. He knew that our government would have complete deniability, and capture meant almost certain death. He knew this unit was so secret that even other Special Forces troops did not know of their existence. He knew the casualty rates of the missions could be up to 110%, meaning that almost every S.O.G soldier was wounded more than once, if they survived. It wasn't for the glory or to earn medals. It was for something bigger than just himself. The unit's motto says it all. You have never lived until you've almost died. For those who have fought for it, life has a flavor the protected will never know.
Well, part of the problem with MAC v. S.O.G was they were so threatened. This is a very clandestine unit, very top secret. If you ever speak about this, even mumble about this, you know, it's 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. It scared the hell out of them. Back then, our government actually did it.
The one that really sticks out in my mind was the convention that they had. And we were invited there and was told that our loved ones' files would be there for us to view. And that there would be counselors and things there to talk about the situation. So we spent all that money getting there with high hopes that we'd know something. And we get down to the tables. They had all the files on each individual table with family names there. And on it was a file that said top secret classified on it. And the file was empty. There was nothing in it. So we came all that way with no answers to our questions. So I was kind of questioning why. You know, we were told that we'd have some answers, and we get no answers. So he gave us some blah blah stuff, and I asked him specific questions pertaining to Richard's case. And he looks at me, he goes, well, where did you find out this information? And I said, top secret, classified.
And being in the intel community for a majority of my career, we've got secrets for a reason, and we keep things at certain levels for a reason. However, family members who have lost a loved one in a situation like your father's, the military comes. I think they come out a little bit more in letting you know, and again, entrusting you to make sure that those secrets don't become public knowledge, but it helps you as an individual get through the day.
We're alone for a long time, and the government didn't seem to want to help us. That hurt more than anything.
I'll bet it did, because you are a man who believed in fighting for his country. You were proud of your sons who were part of the armed forces.
Yeah, I think it's necessary for the grieving process. You can't fully, I mean, maybe you can never fully comprehend what happened, but without the information, without somebody sitting down and talking to you and telling you the truth, you're never, you're lost. You're absolutely lost.
Stand up over here. Very moving accounts in print and on television and radio of your success after 21 years in bringing the remains of your son who was killed in Vietnam home. What did that feel like? Did it feel like a victory, or was it a bittersweet victory?
Very bittersweet, and he wasn't in Vietnam. He was in the Green Berets, and he was involved in long-range reconnaissance missions into North Vietnam and into Laos. And that's where his helicopter was shot down, was in Laos. But I have been bitter at times against the government because I thought they were a little slow.
Before I knew it, I found myself at a reunion in Vegas. Men that fought beside my father. Welcome to SOAR, the Special Operations Association reunion. I began to weave the clues, confirming my father's 1-1 or Team Leader's Assistant position with Recon Team Maryland out of my lot. These clues would help piece together a tiny bit of Mark V. S.O.G's history as well. At a moment's notice, one of these men agreed to talk with me. Now a retired general, Eldon Bardwell served as a Spec 4 in 1968 with my father. We hurried into the nearest room. No prep time, no prepared questions, no fancy equipment. Fighting every bad element possible for an interview. Guerrilla tactics and a palm-sized camera would have to suffice.
We were all in the street out there by the talk, and Major Sincere explained this, and one of those people was Richard Fitz, who was there at Mylock with about 60, 70 other folks, and people started raising their hands. I raised my hand and said I'd go, and Clyde said, no, you already been on a mission and got your CIB. I'm going to take some of the support guys, and two of my...
In this room, I would hear of this gentleman's small part in our story, and would lead to a new discovery. My father was to take over as team leader on Eldon's team, Recon Team Michigan, and sadly, why that was never to take place.
If I remember correctly, Richard Fitz had been on the hazard force, and he was supposed to come to RT Michigan and be my team leader, because the current team leader that I had 2 weeks left in country, and he was leaving and not run any more missions, and I was a brand new guy, so they wouldn't make me a team leader as a young Spec 4, E4. Of course, none of that ever happened because, fortunately, all those people died. But anyway, that's it.
Our job is different. The way we worked was you're a quiet professional. You get a good day as a mission, you go out and you come back, and nobody talks about it because the missions are top secret for a reason. And that presents a unique paradox for every family like yours. and then the men who want to tell more. And a lot of times the guys, particularly the first 20 years, a lot are hesitant because they're under direct orders, they've signed documents saying we can't talk about it. So in your case, whoever did talk to you, and they did it in such a way that you didn't come around going to the media and spilling the beans. So you held up your end of the deal too.
I think your father deserved a lot more than just a Bronze Star, in my personal feelings. You know, if you gave up your life for this country, you know, it deserves more than just a Bronze Star. Yeah, and that bothers me. And I think they should at least look into your father, look into what was said. So that mission should be upgraded. You know, the one where he went in for the POW. If that's what they said, Silver Star, they shouldn't have downgraded it.
As I would continue to weave through a myriad of questions, seeking out whatever I could find out about my father, a quick message from Crawford, a S.O.G veteran I had never even met, would lay another gift at my feet in a simple email attachment. 4 S.O.G veterans' after-action eyewitness reports of an earlier mission my father took part in, a successful prisoner snatch.
But we went in with a late afternoon infiltration and were able to move over a pre-selected route to an RON site. The next morning we began reconning for a suitable snatch site. I think we may have been the least decorated unit in Vietnam. Number one, because we were a classified unit and the missions were obviously classified, and I don't know of anyone in the unit who ever even remotely considered anything about awards at the time. You know, it was about who you had on the ground with you and getting the mission accomplished and getting out. We found a site, we set up the snatch, we had established an ORP and had pre-positioned claymores. The way we set up was your father had one flank element. Art Bader had another flank element. And I had the snatch team in the center. Pretty much seconds after we initiated the snatch, we came under fire from extremely heavy fire from our west, which was the position your father was in. He relayed that there was a large enemy force responding to the snatch, and we're successful in getting three POWs. We started to pull back with the POWs, and we withdrew to our ORP. We covered that withdrawal primarily with hand grenades. We managed to break contact momentarily till we got to the ORP, and shortly thereafter they launched their first assault on us in the ORP, which we were able to break up the assault with the pre-positioned claymores and with additional hand grenades. That was the first of 3 assaults on the ORP. We were informed during this time that our pre-selected exfil LZ and our alternate LZ both were quoting the Covey writer, "It looks like somebody stirred up a fire ant hill down there," said they are everywhere. And so obviously we had to go to plan B, which we didn't have. And Covey was attempting to find us a suitable area to get exfil from. And he advised me that he had a bomb crater located approximately 500 meters away along the same ridge line that we were on. And we were going to have to make basically a movement under fire to get there. Your dad and Art Bader had custody of the POWs, and they were enforcing their will on them at the time to assure that we got out with what we came for. But they were, at the same time, they were having to provide the cover for us to basically do a retrograde backwards. It kind of like a mad minute that went on for hours.
Not only were all the team members put in for the Silver Star, but as well, the mission's orders came directly from the White House. To quote one of the reports from Durgan and Roger Lockshire, I could see Sergeant Fitz pulling along the 3 POWs while fighting off the pursuing enemy. Yet another what the F moment for me.
We finally make it to the bomb crater, and an exfil herd came in and was in a short hover above. He couldn't land because of the slope of the ridge we were on, and he didn't really have enough rotor clearance to get in fully to the crater. We got the wounded Sioux on board. Your dad and Vader managed to get the 3 POWs on board, and as they scrambled on board the chopper, as I started to move toward the helicopter, I had 5 NVA came into the vicinity of the bomb crater, and that was my last engagement, with my last round was on the 5 of them. And then I climbed into the helicopter, and as soon as I hit the floor, one of the POWs attempted to come out of the helicopter, and he tried to go through me. So we had a come to Jesus meeting there on the floor of the helicopter. And
to be able to tell the story of these missions, the veil of secrecy and a lack of information posed a big challenge. So we traveled extensively across the country and recruited very dedicated reenactors that knew every detail about Mark V. S.O.G. and even helped us get into character to portray the best we could. But lo and behold, one of our trips would be unexpectedly diverted, and ironically would create a chance to speak with a true patriot, as if my father's spirit was reaching out to guide us. Only this time, it was in the form of the artist's brush and a portrait of a warrior.
We had the opportunity to get down there last minute and go through his gallery. It's quite an honor to sit down on this gentleman's gallery, how many people he's touched worldwide. And for me to look up and see my father's portrait next to Pat Tillman or Chris Kyle, that kind of put things in perspective. He's a very spiritual man, and I think these things happen for a reason. There's things that we can't explain that go on, and I think Ken is very connected into that world.
You're real, okay? Look where I live, huh? You think these guys are out there in the graveyard watching their bones go away? Where would you be? Right here, okay? I have busloads of people come in here, and I tell them the stories. See, I know the stories of everybody here. The reason I know the stories is I have to read his epitaph. I have to read everything about him to find out what he liked to do when he was a kid, or you know, just whatever, something that if he were alive, he would say, hey, I like that portrait. Yeah, that depicts who I am. I like that. So you paint it as if he was alive with a big smile on his face. Or I was not the qualified one to get this done, okay? But like they say, God don't always pick the qualified ones. He picks the willing, and I was willing, so.
One that did it for me was coming home one day, watching a spiritual medium on the TV, and he's explaining how these so-called energies or spirits come through, and how do you know it's them? I brushed it off. said, well, sometimes when a light bulb flickers, it's, it's your loved one. So I, alone in my house, out loud said, yeah, and I'm sure if my father wants to get in touch with me, the next light switch I hit, my light will flicker. So I get up and I went to the bathroom, hit the light switch, the light bulb blew up. I still had the black mark on the ceiling to prove it, and all I did was look up and say, hi, Dad. There's so many spiritual connections that, there's some that tie in with Linda Haney, who we have here. She felt the same way.
And I said that I didn't get close to people because my dad died when I was 16 and it devastated me. I adored him. And then I said, I didn't even say a name to her. I said, when the love of my life got killed in Vietnam, or Laos actually. And I said after that I shut down emotionally. That was it for me. I never got close to anybody again. And she started doing this, like with her hand, like over my shoulder, right past my face. What's wrong with this woman? She said, oh, I'm sorry, you don't know, but I'm psychic. And she said, he's right there. He's right there. He's with you all the time. Don't you feel that? And I said, well, I know he's with me. He helps me. He sent me so many signs. It's amazing. And then I cry all the time, and I say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm crying again. I know you tell me you're here, but I can't touch you and feel you and smell you. But they're there. And they do send you signs if you pay attention. Grief will dampen that, so you need to lift up from the grief so you could get the signs.
We can go on. There's something going on here that thankfully is pointing us in this direction to tell this story.
And yet another coincidence. Or was it? After years of trying to relocate and reconnect with the one person I knew was close to my father in Nam, leaving voice messages for any random Kraus I could find in the phone book, in a desperate search for answers, came that one summer day. Bada bing. Kraus returns a call to me. He had put his house up for sale and moved out of state. The house hadn't sold for quite a while. And one day, he made a trip back to check on the house. And even though the house phone had been turned off, he decided to check the answering machine. My message was the only one there. The spirits that be reach out again and soon helped paint a picture of my father's last day alive and the events that led up to that tragic day on November 30th, 1968, and the mission that, along with 6 other Green Berets, would ultimately take my father's life.
We had done 3 missions that month, so normally it was only 1 mission a month. We had done more than what we needed, so we were a young team. We were young guys and full of adventure, and we were eager to do our thing. It was exciting. It was it was a high you get out of this kind of a thing. It was exciting. You want to go back to it again. So the last day that I remember of with Richard Fitz, it was our downtime. It was a nice sunny day. First thing we have in the morning is every morning we have a roll call. We have a little distribution of who's got what assignments, if there's anything to be done. I was a camp electrician. We had a large generator. The Seabees had built a TOC underground bunker for us, but it wasn't finished yet, so it was being built. The first thing we're going to need down there is lights. We're going to need light switches, light bulbs. We're going to need outlets. And I'm going through there. It's getting close to noontime. I better go up topside and see, get ready for lunch. And I get up topside, and there's a bunch of helicopters on our launch site. And I come out, and Art Bader and Fitz are all suited up, ready to go, looking to go on a special operation. Major Toomey flew in out of Da Nang with some choppers, and he wanted to do an insertion. I believe it's been declassified as Italian green, and you deploy sabotaged ammunition into their supply lines.
One of them was the Operation Elder Son, which was to go in, insert ammunition that's designed to explode when the enemy uses it. So there's a psychological impact. You also remove enemy troops.
The mission basically was to conduct cross-border operations, which involved reconnaissance, direct action. In the case of your dad's, we were using doctored ammunition.
And it was more of an impromptu type mission where a team, it wouldn't be a team per se. This would be all Americans. The Americans would get together, get the ammo, load up the helicopter, and then pick a point along the enemy trail, along the Ho Chi Minh Trail complex somewhere, and they have and Covey, the FACT forward air controller, would go out and find areas that the helicopter could get in, the team could get off, drop the stuff off, make it look like it's part of the trail, or if a recon team had found a cache, an enemy cache, they would go in, put in and mix the ammo with the good ammo that's in the cache.
So that was going to be an easy mission. They wanted all Americans and no Vietnamese, no brew. It's going to be in and out and be there just half a day or less. But when I came up, I saw they were all suited up, ready to go. I said, "Whoa, wait for me! I'm going too." You know, they had a full team. They didn't need me, so I missed out. I said, "Son of a gun, you're breaking up the team." You know, I helped load them up, carried their equipment to the helicopters, and this is where 7 guys got on one helicopter, and there was another helicopter where there only 2 guys got on. Normally, it doesn't happen that way. Why it did, I don't know. And that was the last I got to see of him. I said, you know, bring me back a souvenir. So by now, my souvenir is Richard Fitz Jr.
Well, I think my recollection started with the airbursts. We received anti-aircraft shells. We were flying approximately, and once again, 4,500, 4,800, 4,600 feet with a CH-34 King B, which had the team on it, your dad included. We were basically on either side of the aircraft, probably 20, 30 feet above or below, given the circumstances. The aircraft bursts were numerous and close, at which point it is routine for a pilot to put the aircraft into a dive and get down to treetop. Anti-aircraft is governed to explode at certain altitudes. The CH-34 did not respond as quickly as the muskets did. The aircraft received some shrapnel damage, as I understand it. It did not take a direct burst. During our dive, that aircraft had been hit.
As a result, my father's helicopter went down, while simultaneously taking defensive action. Both of the Huey gunships went to the immediate aid of the downed chopper.
We came around just seconds after it actually hit the ground. An internal explosion took place out of the cargo door. From my experience, it appeared to be somewhat like a white phosphorus, we call them Willie Pete type explosion. It wasn't consistent with any fuel that the aircraft was carrying, as far as I could only assume or speculate that it was possibly part of the cargo that they had on board.
The consequential explosion and intensity of it more than likely took the lives of the 3 Vietnamese and 7 Americans on board. It was determined, unfortunately, that a rescue attempt known as a bright light would be futile.
The reason that we didn't use a bright light on that particular mission was the ASA, the Army Security Agency, intercepted a message that the bad guys, the North Vietnamese, knew the bird went down and they were surrounding it, and there would have been whoever tried to come in there. And it was obvious from the reports of the the Army helicopters, that when it impacted, that was it. There was no chance on God's earth that anybody survived that because of the ammunition.
Getting together with Richard Fitz Jr. has helped me to settle a bit of loss. When I lost Bader and Fitz, I lost a friend. I lost a couple of friends. I've lost other friends that were in Vietnam too, but not as tight as we were. And so for a while, after their death, they were missing. Because the bodies were never found. For years, they were claimed as missing. And I had ghosts following me that I every so often would bump into a ghost. And the story of their tragic end would come up once in a while in stories. Various special forces teams would tell the story of what happened. And I kept on bumping into them. I didn't go looking for them, but I kept on automatically. It was like, here, dude, look at this. Don't forget me. It was Thanksgiving Day. You can never forget Thanksgiving Day. And the tragedy that happened that day. It was so, but for a while I always wondered why it wasn't me. I was a bachelor. Both Bader and Fitz were both married. Bader was divorced. Richard had an infant son. He had everything to live for. I was a bachelor. Why not me being taken instead of? And there is no answer to it. And there is no. And so, but it bothers you. It bothered me.
It makes one believe in fate that, heck, I could have been picked to go on that mission, but it just said, no, I want to take some of these guys.
We lost a lot of people in Vietnam, and we lost entire reconnaissance teams that would be inserted and never heard from again. And in some cases, we may get a person or two back, extract them, but we have lost full teams.
All I can say is that I lost some good buddies and some really great men.
I was really proud to know you, Father, and I was proud to be in charge of the detail when the body came back. And I think any American that gives his life like that, unselfishly, really deserves to be remembered. And this is a good way to preserve that memory.
And today there are still 50 Green Berets from S.O.G that are still MIA in Laos. There are 105 aviators who died supporting S.O.G, still MIA in Laos alone, to give you a sense of how deadly that war was.
I joined in '69 when I heard about Richard. When I went to Vietnam, I tried to look for him. At the time, I didn't know he was in Laos and not in Vietnam, so there was a restriction as to where I could go, and being I was only a Spec 4, it wasn't like I could tell people where I wanted to go.
The reason I still go to Southeast Asia, and I was just there 2 weeks ago, is the guy that broke me and the guy that replaced me on RT Idaho are still missing from May of '68. And I've been searching since I retired from the military for the past 35 years.
And I know Richard can attest, even though he was only 2 years old when his father was killed, and it was many years later before they found his remains, the grief doesn't end. He never knew his father personally, really. I'm sure he doesn't have a lot of memories of his father, but that was still his father, and I'm sure he's heard stories of him over the years. And so the grief doesn't end, it changes, and you get accustomed to dealing with it because you don't have any other choice. So, you go on with your life the way it is, and hearing stories about him and knowing that his dad was a war hero, I'm sure is, heartwarming to him, and seeing his name around on the wall in Abington and, you know, and at other places. You know, I know from experience that those little things, they help you cope with your loss.
And just know that there is a whole community countrywide that is embracing you with love.
And especially local communities, again, involving your local community to get them involved and be an advocate for the family.
Mm-hmm. And no one knows what it's like until you've actually had a folded flag put in your hands. You know, and, you know, thank you for your service. Our country, you know, appreciates your son's service. And that, no one knows what that's like until that happens to you.
The loss of 7 Americans in one mission was devastating, and even forced some SOG missions to be cut short or aborted. That fateful mission has echoed throughout many a SOG warrior's mind, etched deep in their memories. So vivid that it has been written of in some captivating books by SOG veterans, such as team leader John Plaster's book, or John Stryker Meyer's Across the Fence. Mentioned as well in a series by Special Forces historian Jason Hardy, even making an appearance in American Rifleman magazine May 2008. But most of all, that mission is still talked about in their most private circles to this very day. Locally, we have been honored to have a Vietnam Veterans Post named after my father. Myself and my mother are honorary members, and including my son, we march with them. I am privileged to carry the American flag in their color guard and proudly wear my father's beret. Out of respect, I adorn the Gold Star emblems over his unit patches and the symbolic black band of mourning with the Gold Star pin over the beret flash to ensure everyone can understand our story. I never served in the military. I never claimed to be a Green Beret. There's no stolen valor. So why wear his beret? I think my father said it best in his own words.
When you hold that beret in your hands, you hold me. Because we have been through so much together. Treat it like your own son, Dad. Because believe it or not, the beret you hold in front of you is your own son.
You see, that beret is my own father. And when marching with it, I, his only son, grant him sight. He looks through me. I help him see that he and all who have paid the ultimate sacrifice are still honored and remembered, that they did not die in vain. No, I did not earn that beret. What I did earn was a folded flag for a lifetime without a father, a wife without a husband, my son without a grandfather. That is a hell of a sacrifice, and one I am willing to accept with pride and honor for all of your freedoms and mine, for God and country, and for our great nation.
Just what could I say? 'Cause he was my brother on our wedding day. Now just what can you say? When you find out your lover is in love with your lover, there's many a day
And again, this is Travis with Oscar Mike Radio. Thank you for watching the film. We're going to Q&A in just a minute. I'm going to switch you to the Fitz family tribute, and hang with me, please. Thank you. Keep the questions rolling in.
Covering zipper.
That's us.
We good?
We're good. He said go.
And now we're live with the Q&A period. Keep your questions coming in over YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. I'm going to throw you to Danielle, who has some thoughts with Richard and Rudy. Thank you so much for watching.
There's always a little laughter when I'm involved. A little bit, but let's talk. I saw you before, and I saw you before we started watching this documentary that you guys put. Wowzer McGee. Like, if anybody has ever just taken any kind of film anywhere and tried to edit, you understand what that, what you went through. But you changed from once that documentary started. Your energy changed. It was like you were reliving it all over again, and that
Exactly
took
right.
years and hours and hours. And you've seen it so many times. Tell me, what were you thinking? What went through your mind?
It's always heavy. If I may, and I think Rudy can probably attest to this, you probably noticed it more as we went, but it was almost a separation from myself when I was doing the project. I was kind of shutting emotions off subconsciously. I didn't know I was doing it. So I was just, very goal orientated, just trying to get the job done. When I look back at the movie now is when it gets heavy. That's when it's like, wow, because all that work is done. You don't have the prep switch in your head. You're not, as Travis would say, it's not mission go. You get to step back.
Yeah.
And that's when it starts coming in.
Rudy,
So-
what have you seen in him? I mean, you guys have a cute little story about how you even got connected, and it goes even deeper about parents knowing each other and things like that. Tell me a little bit about why you took on this project and the transformation that you've seen in Richard through that.
Well, thank you for hosting us too, and thank you to all the veterans out there first, I want to say. But Memorial Day and veterans in their service goes along deep in my heart. And when I was living in Washington, D.C., through like the 2000s, I would go to the wall from time to time, and I would visit only one name that I knew, and it was the Fitz, because my family lived in Massachusetts, and I knew that my parents were friends with Richard A. Fitz Sr.'s parents. And so it kind of ran deep in my family that, you know, we knew this Fitz family, and I would visit the wall. And then when I moved up here, I ran into Richard at a music store and the piano mill, and it's like, wow, man, are you the Richard Fitz? That's, you know, I knew there was a son, and there he was. So yeah, through that we got connected, but it was years and years later.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to the story, but from there we kind of, you know, we started off with the box cassettes or videotapes, and then we went on to do like once a week at least for a couple of years. We met every week, and I mean, whether we just sat around and talked about our family problems or did some hardcore editing,
yeah,
we just kept pushing ourselves, and then, you know, doing a lot of weekends where we had to go away. So,
what was it like for you watching all the comments come in during this live showing of the documentary and the support?
Well, that's exactly what it was, is support. You know, you do work, you like to have people notice what you do. You know, now everybody wants to be noticed for their work or what they do. This has a little bit more depth to it because it's such a personal story, and along with the effort, if you finally get that recognition and appreciation, that you see these people understand that it's a little bit bigger than just myself that I'm doing it for, and they're starting to realize it. Yeah. That in itself is, you know, it's like I said, it's heavy. It's almost overwhelming in a way, but the appreciation is there.
Yeah.
That's what it was about.
I mean, you can see the ripple effect of what your story and your father's story had on the community just in pieces of the documentary, and then to see it firsthand while you're watching these comments come through and being able to talk to them. So I have a couple questions that I saw kind of come in, and questions that myself that I had coming through. But how'd you come up with 21 years of Folded Flag? Where'd the name come from?
that took a long time to come up with. We had different titles that we worked with through the years, and then, you know, Richard was very adamant about putting the 21 years in there, and it was kind of a compromise. I think it went around 2 or 3 times before, you know, and we worked with titles for a long time before we actually got to.
For me, I always had kind of a direct idea, and the reason was that I didn't want it to be your typical title, an obvious statement, you know, because, you know, I don't mean to belittle it, but it's all over the place. I want people to think. I wanted something to kind of generate their brain a little bit and not be so obvious. And so the 21 years, 41 days, that's how long it was before I actually got that phone call.
Well, that 21 years was impactful for you.
Right.
It was, who's my father? I mean, the questions, the rolling of the questions and the doubts and the, who am I? That must have been like when you heard, I've heard you say this before, and I heard it in the documentary that he didn't even know people didn't even know that he existed.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that didn't know that. Yeah.
And, which I can understand, he was a young soldier, you were a young boy. Man, did you feel like, I'm nothing? I don't know, like through those 21 years, or when people are like, ooh,
not
I don't
through the
know.
years. It wasn't through the years, but there was some. I would get a bit of resentment at times when I heard people like they'd confuse me with some other cousins or something like that, and talking about it as if, you know, they were me or something like that. A lot of people get it confused, and when I was younger, it used to bother me a lot.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of resentment because of that. And then, you know, again through the funeral, it was obvious. There was so many people that just did not know what the reality behind the screen was. Yeah. And it was obvious. So part of me was like, you know, a bit rebellious about it. You know, I was like, hey, you know, y'all, you just don't get this. You know?
Well, that story is, a lot of people can connect, because there's a lot of babies that never get to see their father.
Right.
So that part of it, I'm glad you were willing to kind of a little be vulnerable about that piece of it, because that hits home for a lot of.
Well, it's part of the reason I did it. It really is, because I mentioned it, about the 9/11 thing. I stated the fact that we're creating stories just like mine, and I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, this picture right here, right? This is kind of shows it's. I had to bring it out because I was like, what a cute little nugget and a family, and
Nugget.
And but pictures show have a lot of meaning for it. What's it like to go down a street named after your father?
Well, that's hard to answer, and I'll tell you why. Because it's been there for so long. It's, you grow up with it, and I know, again, I don't mean to belittle any of it. Of course, it makes me proud. But at the same time, if I was to be honest with you, I've seen that since 75. Yeah. So, and there was a rededication years back, along with the corner and the memorial corner there and everything. But at the same time, you get used to life as a certain way. So to answer a question like that, I mean, the obvious answer is pride. Of course it is,
right.
But it's always been there.
Right.
This has always been what happens in my life. This is from 2 years old. It's it is what it is.
How did you find a recording of your father reading that letter?
It's always been around. I've always known about the letter. I knew about the tape, but did not have it. I believe I got that tape right after my grandparents passed, or had a copy of it.
It's pre-cassette too. It's 2 little reel-to-reels.
Yeah, little.
It's that old.
So then somebody had converted it onto a CD, and the story from there, it was. I don't know if that was done on one of the very early, probably a realistic, little, cassette player, and it was so beat up, it was so bad. It sounded like Chipmunk. The speed was up and down. It was there was so much distortion and grossness, and it went through 3 different stages. It was a very close friend of mine who some of our music is actually on the soundtrack, and he had a decent little program. I said, "Do you think you can clean this up?" So I heard it, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." I went to another gentleman, Joe Clapp at was it Ultrasound, and he got it to a really great point. Then my final master, I went to Sean McLaughlin, who cleaned it up, and it was just pristine after that. You could hear the reverb in the room that he was talking in. The difference was night and day, but it was 3 stages of work.
And then I had to step in too and put a graphic on there to identify his father, because so many people just think it's Richard talking, because not only does he look like him, he sounds like him. And it was confusing people. But I always felt that was a high point of one of the high points of the movie or the film is when you actually hear his voice read that letter and what he says in that letter. It's so powerful.
You can't help but get emotional and teary-eyed and feel, and I almost have a sense of like, do you think, maybe it's just my mother coming in and putting myself in that position of having a Marine son myself, although your father was a Green Beret, but I almost feel like, did you feel like he was like, this might be my last words?
Everybody says the same thing. It's almost like that. It's just like, just in case.
Yep, it's like he wrote his own eulogy.
Yeah.
Didn't want to come out and say it in a way, but he said, "I'm going to do this anyway." So
When you hear the stories of people that served with him talk, do you ever get a sense of like, gosh, I wonder if my dad had fear, or I feel this fear for him? I mean, I kind of did when I was listening. I was like, "Whoa, that's really real."
I guarantee that my father had fear. I know he did. I know every one of those guys had fear. And that's the difference, that's what courage is.
Right. What does that make you feel like as a son, listening and knowing?
You always picture yourself in certain situations. You don't know what you're going to be or what, unless you're in a situation like that. And even those guys, other than their training, they say it themselves. You just don't, if you put yourself in a situation, you don't know how you're going to react. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I guess we could all have those thoughts and fantasies, what ifs and all that. Who knows? You just don't know, and I tend not to go there too much. You know what I mean? Because you just never know. And I like to believe, like back when I was younger, I had thought about here and there about going in, but by the time I really got over all this, and I did have a lot of bitterness and negative feelings about the whole military thing, and it took me quite a while to get over it and really understand the difference between the Brotherhood and their boss. Yeah. And that was a big hurdle for me. And by the time that was, I was already way past the prime.
And you had
I was just
great
like,
mullet that you would have to get rid of. I mean, come on, the hair is important.
Oh, I said if they let me keep that, I'm in.
Do we have any questions from the audience out there? Please feel free, ask anything. Richard's here, Rudy's here.
We do. We got a couple questions. So from June Toothman, she says, I noticed that Fort Polk was mentioned. What was Fort Polk's portion of Staff Sergeant Fitz's military life? Possible training?
More than likely was Polk in there?
We went there and we used Tigerlands.
Yeah, but it wasn't an actual Tigerland. It was a offshoot of Tigerland.
Right, but it was in that general area.
Yeah, what we did there was on the outskirts of Fort Polk. We did our first reenactment there. We met a whole mess of reenactors that, quite frankly, I didn't even know existed at the time. And
Vietnam era.
Right. Well, SOG guys.
Right.
So I didn't even know it existed, and I'm sure we hooked up with them via social media, and we needed footage because there was nothing available.
Yeah.
So we were just everything was top secret, and there was nothing available. So we had to somehow come up with, I guess you'd call it B-roll stuff to to help the story go by. So we went to Louisiana at Tigerland, tactical at Tigerland, and we met all these guys, and we put them through some paces. They were willing to help us, and that was our first reenactment segment was in Louisiana. And our last day, we ended up getting rained out. One of the hurricanes at the time were coming through, and it was just buckets of rain. So we lost the ability. We were gonna get everything we needed from there, but we lost the ability the last day.
And then we went to Vermont
so
to
last,
shoot the rest.
Last minute, we found the Vermont folks.
Nick.
Yeah, Nick Diaz.
Yeah.
And
but Jason down there in Louisiana, isn't that where he's from?
Yep. Yeah. Jason Langley.
Yeah. And they did they had some great reenactors. Those guys really.
Man, I learned a lot, and I was like, I'm sitting there going, man, these guys know more about my own father than I do. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, just a wealth of knowledge they were, and so helpful. It was really great, And then when we did the second one, we really lucked out. I gotta put a plug in for Troy Arms Industries, because we were able to acquire their 40th anniversary of the reissue of the Car 15, and we were able to get 3 of those and use actual live ammo in the second Vermont reenactments. It was quite the thing. But this is what I mean by the support. We had so many people that were willing to just go above and beyond and help us do this story. It was crazy.
So another question comes from B52. He's been checking in all night.
Yeah.
He says, how many other families have you met with in similar situations, and how have you all communicated?
I can tell you flat out that a similar situation, very, very few.
The guy we met at Soares, the 35-year, his father or his uncle was gone. Remember that? Tilt hooked us up with him right outside the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
He was from South Carolina.
You mean Mickey Jones?
I believe so.
Yeah.
His
so
remains.
One person that was similar
right.
out of all.
Yeah, I think it was a different generational thing, and that's here's what's different about it is that when you're talking about a young boy at this age, or son, or whatever, or daughter, it's so rare to find this, and it's only because there were so few people doing these operations, and then so highly classified.
Right.
So when it comes down to it, there's so few that really kind of went through this. There's a couple of olders, and I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's rare, and I've only met a few. Like,
Yeah, because
he
was not a direct descendant. He was like, it was his uncle because he didn't
Yes.
have any children.
Right.
And a lot of
That's right. Yep.
soldiers didn't leave
Yep.
behind situation like unique like Richard's.
Right. So I guess in a lump shell, it's very few. You know, it's hard to connect with people that, you know, there's not many of us.
Yeah.
You know.
I guess it's not just in general. There's a lot of children that lose their father.
Yes.
To make sure we clarify that, but in this situation where you are a young child and you lose a father, and then you're not allowed to find any information about your father through your entire childhood all the way into your adulthood, and then all of a sudden, wham! You know, that was like heavy duty. I mean, when they buried Richard's remains 21 years later, they still didn't have answers. It was still classified. So it was not, you know, it was torture for the family for years.
Did you even have a full understanding? Like, what is your understanding of his mission or what he was doing?
Well, I have a lot more understanding because through this whole research and everything, and even after, I found out so much more information, other missions, you know, if you really follow the movie, it hints into the fact that there should be even more medals. And it was admitted when I started lining up everything, going, okay, well, here's a letter home that says Bronze Stars, but all his records say Bronze Star was for the mission he was killed in. Okay? But then the same mission that I'm talking about in the letter, he was injured. All right? If you look at that Purple Heart, there's an oak leaf in there. That means 2 injuries, 2 separate missions. So they acknowledged the other mission, but didn't get that Bronze Star for that mission. Now let's go back to the other gentleman who did the prisoner of war snatch. Vernon Ward. That mission, they were all put in for Silver Stars. Vernon Ward did get that Silver Star. So this is, when I did all the dates, and here's what was confusing to me, being that I was finding out all this information, a lot of it looked similar on paper. So like, you're looking at missions and you're looking at all this firefights and outnumbered and all that, but I never realized that almost all their missions were like that. And it was like, so I was kind of questioning, going, well, maybe this date's mixed up. Maybe this is the same mission. And really kept ironing it out, and come to find out they were completely different missions. So now I'm putting it all together. Well, there's at least a V device on one of them Bronze Stars, and probably a Silver Star to boot. So.
Do you feel like you want your father to, even though it's been passed in so long, be honored for those? Or do you feel like, you know what, he's a hero and that it's not going to make a difference?
I've got to be honest with you, I'm right up the middle with that. I know these guys, and they don't do it for the medals. They never did. But I think there's a certain, if it's there, it should happen.
Yeah.
You know, and I said it briefly on our interview previously that, you know, there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape to deal with. I'm not too sure about even the first steps to take. And whether or not I can separate myself from my world right now, not to belittle it, but I am surviving every day. So I really got to take a different mindset, regroup, and then look at that and focus on one thing at a time, you know? So hopefully someday that'll happen, you know?
So we have another question. Rich Fitz asked, what type of muscle car did your dad drive in high school? Came over the chat.
We never did.
Don't know about that. I know he had loved motorcycles. He had every kind of car in the world. According to my mother, I'd have to refer to my mom about this, but there was a lot of different cars that he had. And I couldn't remember the details. Again, I was 2 years old, so you know I didn't know him in high school.
We can go to his alma mater.
Yeah.
South Shore Votech.
South Shore Votech,
down the road,
right.
and we could check the tire tread.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I'm
right.
sure left a few burnouts
He
in
probably
there.
did, yeah.
He was that kind of guy.
Yes, he definitely was.
So,
my mother used to tell stories how he used to like to race the train.
Really?
In a pickup truck. Put my mother in the passenger seat and try to beat the train over the tracks.
Oh.
Well, we have another question from Liz Borden. And Liz,
Hey.
thanks for checking in tonight. What's the next step to get this out for everyone to see?
Well, I don't. Maybe I could. Can I speak for you on this? And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
go
us.
ahead. Yes.
I think as we were going and doing this film, I'm not quite sure if either one of us thought it would get as many legs as it has, and got to the point where it has. I think we probably should take a few steps back and wrap up some stuff that we should have done on the paperwork end of it and things before we do have distribution interest. We've had it, but we got there's some things, loose ends we got to tie up. But we didn't think of it while we were doing it because we really weren't sure that it was going to go like this. And then all of a sudden, bang! And I think both of us were kind of taken back, going, I guess we have something here that let's follow up, rewind, and get it done, and then we can actually try to get into distribution.
Well put.
Yeah. Right.
Good
Okay,
job.
so there we go.
Good job talking for the two of you.
All right.
I'm proud of you.
You guys didn't even see my hand moving.
Yeah.
I was going to say he wants to take 2 steps back. I want to race the train and
pretty much.
get ahead of the crossing. So
Yeah.
that was a great compromise.
Right.
That's what we did.
See, I just don't want the cop on the other side give us the ticket. That's
2
all.
or 3 years down the road of this going back and
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah, pretty
to
much.
be a fly on that wall
Yeah.
through all those adventures. You talk about how you were so different, and visually you're so different in the documentary between your father and you, but internally, even though he didn't raise you because he had passed, there's a lot alike, like including the music piece of it.
Yeah, that music stuff, it's like, it's not like I didn't know he was into music, but yeah, the amount that he was, as I talked to my mother through the years, was kind of like, now I started to see where I was getting it from, because my mother's an artist, a brilliant artist. So I can see where the creativity and art side of it comes from, and it's on both sides of the family. But the music part, I really never put it together. And he was drums, guitar, keyboards, and all this, and the same with one of his younger brothers, same thing. So I never really understood where I got it from until much later. I'm starting to put it together and going, how about that?
Does it kind of make you feel a little close to him in a way? That you have this shared interest?
See, it's hard answering a question like that because, it's kind of a rough thing to say, but I never bonded with him. Yeah. You know what I mean? So answering a question where it feels close to him, it's so hard to say because there's so much of a disconnect there. And to me, it's for such an
but emotional, like more of that emotional tie. Like I am my son's, my father's son.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess so. It's just hard to put it in those feelings.
We got to
for
make
me,
sure that people realize that all that music in there was Richard's. That recorded. He didn't write the Star Spangled Banner, but
right. And the song on most of the outro is a good buddy of mine's band. At the time was the first Contagious
Cry
lineup.
Myself to Sleep.
Cry Myself to Sleep, yep. So they were kind enough to let me use that, and it worked beautiful. So that one I didn't write either, but I had played with all various setups of that band as well for years, and so they were very generous and let me use that. Because it worked perfect.
It really tied the whole movie together was the soundtrack, I believe, because it's such a difficult thing to do, and I think Richard really stepped up to the challenge, and some of the sound effects that were used in there, it really draws you in. Emotionally too. I mean, there's some parts that I can't help but tear up every time I see them. They just, and I believe a lot of it's the music that pulls you in too.
Well, I really
along with the story.
I appreciate that, because I was winging that whole thing. That was the first time I've ever done anything like that. I basically set up all my gear in my basement, and I didn't even have electric in my basement. I drilled holes through my floor, dropped extension cords down. I kind of looked like Tony Stark trying to build Iron Man, And I just grabbed a couple of friends of mine hooked me up with a couple of DAW programs, and I just started putting my face into it and seeing what I could do. And some of the music was stuff that we had left over from one of my bands that we weren't using, so some of that went in there. But about probably 2/3 of it was all original composition as I went.
And a lot of this wasn't just first take things. These were
No.
And the same thing with the voiceovers and stuff. All of a sudden, Richard, we need this, and he'd have to write it, record it, and then we
do it 100 times.
It would go over and over again, and then it would come the same thing with the sound. So it was just, and I'd do the editing. I'd edit, and all of a sudden he'd come in and half that's all gone, and something else comes in. It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. But when you look back at it,
I'm very happy.
Devil is in the details, and you look back at it and you go, wow.
Glad
we did it.
I look at it and I don't see regrets in there.
No. Oh, absolutely
There's
not.
probably, I wish we could have done it, but I'm very happy with it.
Well, I think with most, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a pro, this is my first time doing this, but it's very similar to writing a song. And if you're into that song every day, 1,000 times, then you're going to get a little fed up with it. If you leave that thing alone, like I said, I watched this tonight and I got all the emotions came to me, you know what I mean? So you did something good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As long as you get a step back away from it and go, okay, it was definitely worth it,
What about your grandparents? I mean, you show, your father's parents in the documentary. What was that like for you, watching their pain?
Well, it's hard to talk on that subject. Now, to tell you the truth, both sides of that family kind of separated, especially about 75. So we weren't very close. They're included in the story because of the amount of work and pain and struggle they went through.
Yeah.
They have to. There's no way I don't include them. But I have to look back at it with a much more mature head, and just kind of have a little bit of sympathy and understanding for them. But at the same time, I wasn't really involved or, really close to them.
Yes.
So and come to find out, I've had a lot of close talks to even some of the S.O.G gentlemen I've met about situations like this, and they ironically say it's not uncommon for that to happen. I guess people go their separate ways, especially after something as devastating in an emotional world as that.
So we have a couple questions coming in, and thank you very much for all those. B52 asked, without naming names, what year did you guys know your dad was in S.O.G before the Defense Department confirmed it?
That he was in S.O.G.
That he was in S.O.G.
Not in
That's
Laos, but
89.
1989?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
So
I knew he was a Green Beret
that
before
was
that,
20
but not S.O.G. I knew
21
nothing about S.O.G.
21 years, right?
Yeah.
After his death, still didn't know.
So Ren, and I'm sorry, Ren, I got that wrong the first time, but Ren Fitz.
Ren.
Yep.
Cousin Ren.
Ren was a great help in the documentary
was.
too. He brought us together with Ken, and he also he helped us with hotels, and he was just a great asset to us when we were on the road.
What is his question?
His question is, should military recognize that children suffer PTSD after the loss of a parent that follows them?
Well, that is absolutely true. I think the loss will cause some of that, but there's other factors that I myself have gone through, which is not something I'd rather get into right now as far as details. But there's questions that us kids have a lot is, what would have happened? We all have that what would have been question, and I've met plenty of Gold Star children, but which way does your life go? And so you have that question about, what caused this? Why did you go this direction? I've had some things in my world that, were very difficult. And I ask myself that question every day. What would it have been different? So I can't speak for most, but in my case, I have had issues with that. And I think it should easily be looked into, definitely looked into. And, maybe some answers could be found, and maybe it should help.
Well, speaking of your father, B52 comes back with a question. He says, or asks, who gave you the photo of your dad smiling and smoking the cigarette, and how did it change how you felt about him?
How to change how I felt about my father?
Yes.
The gentleman who wrote Dawson's War was on that helicopter with my father on the way back from an early mission. He's the one that gave me the picture. And I'll tell you how I felt about it, and I have to compare it. There's a few pictures out there that people say are my father, and there's been a lot of controversy. I have very, very few pictures. And a lot of these pictures, my father looks slightly different, or some might be younger, but very few pictures that are actually in country. And he's just one of those guys that happens to look different in every picture. But there was a certain, when I first was approached by him saying that he had a picture, I was very apprehensive because I've been through this so many times where I have this picture, or I know this about your father, or this and that, and it was always a dead end or just wasn't happening. So you turn off a switch and you're like, yeah, okay, and it's hard to be that cynical, but I'll tell you this, when I opened that email and saw that face, it brought me right to my knees. I couldn't believe it. It was so obvious that it was him that there was no question, and I had never seen that picture before. Never seen an angle like that. Never seen, these are the things I talk about, that you grab these, how many pictures do I have, really? Maybe a dozen, if that. And you're always looking at them, and they don't change. You don't see your father from a different angle. You don't see it's always the same. And you're always trying to find that in your head, And all of a sudden I saw that, and I was like, wow. But you know what really made it for me? And if you all know the picture we're talking about, there's no denying the excitement and the smile on his face. And in the situation that they were in, it kind of gives you a little bit of solace about, even though he met his demise, you can't tell me that he was not excited doing what he was doing. Simple as that.
All right, we have one more question. If you have any more, come and ask them right now. But this is actually from your son. Austin Fitz asked on behalf of his grandmother, Vicky Smith Fitz, are you going to do a sequel? I've been interested in that question. I've been interested in that question. I'd like to know.
I'll tell you where my brain sits with this. And Rudy can attest to the fact that there was so much more information found out. We were very limited to an hour and a half in this DVD type of format, or documentary format. And some of the things we questioned about putting in there, and time length and what we could actually put in there. So it really got me thinking about, maybe I kind of put the carriage in front of the horse. So I kind of started going back and saying, you know what, I at least got to do the book version. Because it's going to allow me to incorporate so much more, especially now because there are so many people interested in Mark v. S.O.G, and well-deserved. And I think it's yet another beacon of light shining me going, hey, listen, this project is great. It's grabbing people's attention, but there's so much more behind it. There's so much more information that I found out, which all the people interested in S.O.G want to know. But there's also the end of it that there's more of my side. And I think I want to get into the personal things of what I went through because of this. And I think, so at least the book version, a sequel, I don't know. I got to get that done first.
I think the book,
got to do the book first.
Get it all out there.
Yeah, and those are the things that you have to take down the walls and be very, honest.
You know, you were saying something earlier about there's a lot of interest in this SOG now, and didn't you?
Yeah,
you were telling me about a video game that they actually.
Yeah, and they're watching now. I have to thank Rob Graham over at Savage and Arma 3. They just released their Prairie Fire, SOG Prairie Fire, which was, all done working with all these SOG gentlemen that, some knew my father, whatnot. They're all consultants in there, all involved in this video game. And as you saw on the little tribute, they actually put in a memorial plaque in my father's name at the end of one of the missions in this game. So, I mean, that's just, you talk about validation. That's where it comes in. It's mind-blowing, and I think it's well-deserved. This whole time, it's one thing doing something that, a project like this about a father you never knew. But all along, even from very young, there was just something, I can't tell you what it was, but something kept telling me there was something different, something special, something bigger. Always. Don't know what it was, but it's always been there. And so
it was a guiding light
proof
for us.
It's proof.
The whole project.
As I mean, it's just everybody wants to know about SOG. Everybody, and that is, Travis can speak on it too. That what they did, you don't see that anymore. It's not going to happen the way that one. They don't take those chances. They don't have a lot of people like that anymore, and I think it's well deserved that they get accolades. And having a father part of that, well, yeah, there's a little bit of pride there.
Yeah. Well, you are definitely making the stepping stones for the future to expand in so many different avenues. And
yes. Yep. That's what I hope to do.
Well, I think you have. I think you have. And as you said, that there are no mistakes. No coincidence that you guys ran into each other in a music store, or you started finding all of these people being, put in front of you, and this information put in front of you. There's more to share, and I know everybody who has a similar situation or has it on their heart can take something away from your story.
Right. Yep. And again, that's part of it. Probably most of it. I want to. If there's anybody that goes through anything close to what I have. I say it all the time. You can come out of this a little bit more positive. I know it's a very difficult thing, and I've said it before. I could be the poster child for the most negative person against the government that there could be. But you can come out of this in a way that with some pride, and and honor. Feel proud for your lineage and what you've sacrificed for everybody's freedoms.
Yeah. Well, your father was a little bit of a fairy tale to you, and then you got to see and be part of the massive hero that he was and the impact that he had on this world, and now you are sharing it.
Exactly right. Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Travis, is there any other questions out there that are coming in?
Let me see here. What do we have? Rince Fitz says, thank you for doing the documentary. Richard and Rudy are great people and worked hard to create something that shows the military teams and who's saved many lives, like the elite group his dad was in. Austin Fitz says, Vicky says that both she and your father, Rich Sr., are so incredibly proud of you. I showed the picture. I don't see any other questions coming in. We'll give it a minute or two while you finish up.
I do think your mom might be a hot little ticket herself.
Oh yeah.
It's just even like one of the comments. You'll have to watch the documentary, but one of the comments that she made, there was someone dancing involved, and a little smile that I saw. I said, "Well, I see some Spitfire in there."
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Well, I think that was John Shorten's footage.
Jim.
Jim Shorten, and he provided us with some actual footage from training.
Yeah.
And at the end of the reel of that training reel,
there was that.
Yeah, because
oops, did I send that?
Again, there's no footage of anything of SOG, and there was Jim's footage, and he allowed us to use it, and it is just priceless. The helicopters, it was all training, not live action.
Nothing
we were
over the
able to
fence.
we were able to cut it in key moments to help people follow along when they're talking about roto clearance and things like that, and bringing up the wounded and things like that. So, and then like I said, we get to that last couple minutes of that footage, and then we're going, whoa, hey, the guys were guys over there, you know.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, they had a little fun there at camp one night, and I guess they recorded it. So.
Yep. So if you missed the documentary side of this and you're just tuning in now, you're going to want to rewind and watch so you can have a full understanding of everything that we are talking about. And I did know you told me earlier that you have some of those shirts over there that Rudy is wearing. So if you guys, anyone out there is interested in purchasing one of those, just send a shout out and we will make sure that is taken care of.
Yep.
Thank you, and thank you, Travis of Oscar Mike Radio, for having me come in and be a part of this. Together we are Devoted Mission, so of course I would be here and sharing your story a little bit.
So, one more thing. We have, I didn't figure this out until just now when he said it, but B-52 Egg Beast the entire night is Rob from Savage Games.
Oh, it's Rob.
Oh.
Hi, Rob.
So he is, chatting in that he's really enjoyed this, and thank you, Rob, for all your support. My son's loving Armor 3. I'm learning it.
I am not Rob. I'm sorry, but maybe I will become just as savage.
Oh yeah.
Last question we have here is your son again. Your son is active. He's like, when's the book coming out, Dad?
Yeah.
He's putting him on the spot.
I'll tell you what, there's been a couple nights that everyone at my house has been very generous in helping me here and there rebuild my studio down my basement, my creative space. And once that gets done, I'll be able to hit it hard again. So.
Well, I got to say that I have been trying to push the pencil in your hand.
Yes, you
I've
have.
been trying to talk encouragement into Richard, Richard has actually written quite a bit.
I'm about 10,000, 12,000 words into it.
Yes.
Somewhere in there.
There you go.
But that's when I kind of slowed down, and I took on a COVID lockdown project, which was remodeling my basement. And I got sidetracked because I had to move my business and stuff, and I put everything on hold. And as I mentioned, when I was doing the soundtrack, I had no electric. Extension cords hanging out of my, from my floor. So,
pencil and paper do not include electric.
Yes, they don't, but I need that space. There's just something about a space, I'm just one of those people that has to have a creative space.
So it's coming.
It's coming. Yeah.
It is coming.
And when we're streaming, we're leaving this up on YouTube, are we? Yes? Okay. All right. So just inform me who to tell, what to tell. Is it the same channels? Or?
It's all right here on YouTube, on Facebook. We're not taking it down.
Okay.
Well, it will come down eventually, but for a while you can go back and watch it.
Okay.
And go to OscarMikeRadio.com and find out all the links. And a big thank you to everyone who supported us. Get in here, Keith. Get in here, Keith. I'm here.
Yeah, you got to give him a shout out too.
Well, he came and saved the day at the last minute.
No doubt.
Yeah. I'm still learning.
Got us a restart.
We had a good start, and all the people in the post who support us, thank you very much. And
it was our caterer tonight. They were good too.
Next time for sure. All right.
All set?
Any other thoughts, Danielle?
I think that I got a new understanding of you. Once you see a little bit of that documentary, you can't help but as Travis likes to say, get it in the feels. And a little bit more understanding of the people that I just come into contact with, and our military community and our veterans. The more we understand and hear one-on-one stories, I think the more we can connect and see really what the word hero is and how it impacts and the ripple effect into families and friends that we have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is all I have, Mr. Oscar Mike Radio. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Are we done?
Oh, we're not done, but we're done
for
now.
We're done for tonight, yeah.
You'll hear more from us.
Oh, That's one thing. Thank you. Can I even move here?
No.
There is one more thing.
There is?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
May I get up so I don't trip over
yes.
everything?
Go ahead, you can walk with it.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to come over here, or do you want to come over here?
All right, I don't know what's going on, folks, but here we go.
Travis, have a seat.
Travis, why don't you have a seat where I was sitting? How about that?
No. It doesn't work. We tried that.
Have a seat there.
We tried that, remember?
Yeah. Okay, have a seat. All right. So, I wanted to take a couple of seconds here. We'll let him get mic'd up.
You're good.
Those of you who've watched the documentary are probably aware of one of the highlights, and we have talked about the letter home in my dad's own voice, etc. So I thought it was there was a big top 3 people that really pushed and helped through this whole project, and I picked those 3 out, and I wanted to give them something special and something that was meaningful to me and from the whole story of my father, myself, and our world. And Travis, you are now one of 3 people to have this very special printed out version of my father's letter home. And we had this made up. Mr. Scary's friend, it was Lancini Creations, was kind enough to help us do this. And you can see the letters all printed out nice. It's on like a parchment type of recreation paper. It's actually done in my dad's handwriting, above and below, and a couple of the poignant lines for me I had highlighted, just to make it a little bit clear for people that don't know. The lines for me were, I don't know if I make the beret or the beret makes me. That to me was deep. And of course the last line, treat it like your own son, Dad, because believe it or not, the beret you hold in front of you is your son. So those 2 lines were really, really poignant to me, and I wanted you to be one of the very special people to have that, and keep it on your wall or keep it with you. And so it's gratification for me to have all this help that you've done, all the work that you've put into this. It means a lot to me. I mean, I wish I could give you more, but that I think is heartfelt, and it really means something from down deep. And being a military guy, I think you know where I'm coming from.
I'm blown away right now. I'm absolutely speechless. And I'll tell you why, Rich, because when we first met, you had the unclean version of your dad reading this in the film.
Yeah, that's right.
And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it did not sound like you heard it tonight. And when I heard it, I remember when I first heard it was in the Abington Library showing. That's right. That you had the first audio cleaned up and gotten that lucky break to do it, because I know how hard it is to do audio like that.
Yep.
I was absolutely floored, chilled to the bone. I stopped cold, because there's this man, in my view, and I told you this, I think he was writing his goodbye.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it just got me to my core. It's the best part of this whole thing. And I started Oscar Mike Radio as a way just to help out or tell one person's story. And to be able to have that kinship with you, to be able to do this is just amazing. And this is priceless to me.
Good.
Thank you so much.
It should be,
No. This is.
It means a lot to me too.
There's only a couple favorite things I have in life, and this is now one of them. Thank you.
Well, as Gary says, now you can put it in your war room.
Well, I'm getting one as time goes on.
Yeah,
Thank
there you
very
go.
much.
Yeah.
It was just a real honor.
Beautiful.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Well,
Thank you.
my pleasure. Well deserved.
Thank you.
So now you're only one of 3 people that ever have one of those.
It's amazing. So
I don't even have one.
thank you so much for thank you so much, Rich, and you, and Julie, your mom, and people and people who support us tonight. Thank you again, Danielle. we rode and died and lived to tell about it again. Thank you. And, you know, the story doesn't end here, ladies and gentlemen. You can, you know, check out the Facebook page he has, and he has a YouTube channel where he's doing stuff like this, and you can help keep the story alive, because, you know, the reason why we're here for you tonight is, you know, Danielle, you do not want anybody to be forgotten. Your father's memory and the men who served with him and the men and women who died in Vietnam will not be forgotten on our watch.
Well, it's deeply appreciated, my friend. You know, love it. Thank you very much.
Well, as we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission flight. Danielle, what do you say?
Oh, I say, remember as always, love hard, love pure, and love proactive. Until next time.
We are mission flight. Thank you so much. Have a good, safe Memorial Day weekend, and God bless.
Mm-hmm.